Hi guys, and welcome to our podcast, Pause Politics. I'm your host, Alex, alongside my friend Jack, and we're both university students at the University of Newcastle, and we both study classical studies.
Well, only just both of us.
Not just the both of us, obviously, but so today we thought we'd just discuss some politics. So I think a poignant place to start would be maybe give a little introduction to ourselves. So, Jack?
Hello, my name's Jack, as Alex kindly introduced me. I do study classes at Newcastle, and to be quite honest, that's the most interesting thing about me. Over to you, Alex.
Basically the same subject, same university. I play piano in the meantime, but we both have a quite strong interest in politics. And one thing we've noticed is everything is always politicised. No one cuts, lack of a better word, no one cuts to the ball. So the aim with this really is to take away the politics and just discuss what's happening, basically, and then discuss topical events from both perspectives without specifically looking through one lens.
Because I must admit, I often thought that politicization was a thing that only happened in America, but more and more recently, it's especially when you look at this election. I mean, the propaganda for this recent election almost entirely based on the leader of the party instead of the party. Because you had chants for Jeremy Corbyn, and the big conservative one that was back Boris. And this, for me, was really representative of the American system and shows a almost deep dug, entrenched side to go with rather than voting for a party.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have exactly the same opinion. Politics has become really polarised. 30, 40 years ago, you could have easily had unity governments where politicians would work together to solve the issues of the country, whereas everything now appears to be really, really polarised. No, there is no consensus anymore. Everything is either my way or the highway, really.
Absolutely. And as we've often seen, the highway leads nowhere but despair.
Exactly, and the highway isn't even always the right way, really.
It's to quote AC/DC, it really is the highway to hell.
So I think a very poignant point that really demonstrates that the deep issue of polarisation really is coronavirus and
Absolutely.
how the government's handled it. I think
great place to start.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very topical issue. The government, in my opinion, really hasn't handled it correctly. They've dithered, they've dallied. Boris Johnson's own words for Brexit of what Labour would do, they seemingly have done the same with coronavirus. Really, they acted quite slowly. Cases have risen. There's been local lockdowns in Manchester recently.
I have to agree. I can't greatly defend the government. The only defence I can offer for the government is that there hasn't been in recent history such a crisis as they did say at the time. It was the biggest threat in recent peacetime. But I mean, while they can obviously have the supplies with masks and respirators ready for such an outcry, because it would be pointless if there wasn't a pandemic. I feel that they dilly-dallied, like you say, and yeah, there's no defence really for that. If we look at our continental countries in Europe, they were quick to act with masks, with lockdown, and I think that it's been quite a disappointing show, not just for the government but also for the general public.
Yeah, exactly. A prime example I would say would be Greece. Greece really have got their act together, and they locked it down earlier because they knew for a fact that their health service couldn't cope with it. Whereas, I think the NHS phrase, the phrase at the time was, "We can bend but not break."
Yes.
Which bit ridiculous, really.
And somewhat ironic that the big phrase was "save the NHS." After it was bent out of shape, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not even just that, really. It's not just the government response. It's everything to do with the coronavirus has been politicised. The NHS somehow has been politicised. Doctor and nurse pay is now a partisan issue.
Where I mean, I'm all for parties having different opinions, but to have such staunch different opinions then come down to party whips, I think is ridiculous for such a really a nonsensical issue because it's something that most people are wildly in favour of.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think anyone really is in favour of a less well-funded NHS. Really, it's quite ridiculous that parties play political football with the NHS.
It's because something that we said before we started recording this was we thought it would almost be, as they said, it was the biggest threat since wartime. We thought this would be a wartime issue, as in
Yeah.
all parties working together and not trying to score points on how many deaths there's been with coronavirus. It's quite frankly disgusting that they
It is.
even
It
tried
really is. Really is. I mean, in my opinion, really, a unity government should have been formed. Really,
Yeah.
they should have formed a unity government of all the parties, and they should have said, put politics aside and sort this out. Really, but no, somehow, just as an American. But it's not even just that, actually. It's actually quite an alarming issue. Even the act of wearing a mask now has been politicised. I think I saw, crazy enough, I saw this morning that Anne Widdecombe was saying that
The Conservative MEP.
former Conservative MEP, I think now she's currently a Brexit Party MEP, actually.
Oh, right.
She was saying this morning, actually, I think on the Jeremy Vine show, that she thinks that there should be hours in shops where people can go in without masks.
Oh, can you remember when we were joking that it was just this issue was solely American?
Yeah, exactly.
It's honestly flabbergasting. I just, yeah. I mean, before it was mandatory, I remember walking around Newcastle and my localish town. It's about half an hour away, but it's as close as any other town, Grimsby. And I'd be the only one wearing a mask. I could go and maybe I'd go out into town and see maybe 10 other people brandishing masks, and most of the times they didn't even have them over the nose. So the point of wearing
it's ridiculous, really. Really is. I mean, but the worst thing with that statement is it's treating the people that work in the shops as though they're not human.
Yes, yeah, quite. They're almost sub good health.
Yeah.
Where did this "don't tread on me" attitude come from in the UK?
Yeah, it's but it's not even. I'm all for people having their own individual rights, but when it comes to public health emergencies like this, really, people should just suck it up, really, and just get on with it.
Without treading on another political landmine, it's rather similar to vaccines.
But actually, a good analogy that I recently read is it'd be like during the Blitz. When there was blackouts, it'd be like your neighbour refusing to cover over their windows and then being like, well, it's my right not to black out my windows.
It's my right to have my house bombed, so I shall.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, it's not too really dissimilar to some of the opinions we're seeing with masks, really.
You're completely right. I was talking to a good friend of mine, and we did infer that it's because Boris Johnson is a very populist leader, and that's done the party many favours. It's probably one of the leading factors that got him into power because he is so popular, and his policies have to represent this because he has to keep the people on side. If a more disliked leader was possibly in power, possibly even like Margaret Thatcher, there would have been a more iron fist approach, and I can't help feeling that there'd have been a lot less deaths because of.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's always been the issue with Boris, in my opinion. His beliefs, in my opinion, are very malleable, almost malleable to political opinion. He actually was neither Remain or Leave. He, I think, for his column, wrote both a pro-Leave article and a pro-Remain article, and then when he decided it was opportune for him, he released whichever one he thought would benefit him the most, really.
He plays both sides.
Exactly, and I think we're seeing a symptom of that now, really.
Yes, I think it almost shows how fragile politics is in the UK.
It really does, yeah, really does.
You have to appease everybody in order to get power. So it could almost be seen that it's not that we're not living in a politicized age of partisanship. That it is bipartisan for the fact that you have to please everybody while pleasing nobody.
That is very true, actually, and I think I was once reading something about politicians, actually, and they were comparing voters to keys, almost. So you have keys to a country, and they were saying actually that the more keys that you require to a country, so like the more people. So the issue is with democracies is to an extent, it requires more keys to unlock the country. So therefore, you can't be as firm in issues as you would be otherwise.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think they were saying that for a dictatorship, for example, the only keys you need really are the military, and that's it really.
Yeah. When you look at Rome,
yeah,
ancient Rome.
exactly. Yeah. Whereas with modern democracies, there are lots of keys that are required to run the country. So it could in fact be argued that issues such as popularism actually are more an issue with democracy inherently. I think a famous example actually is the Mytilenian debate.
Yes. Quite.
Yes. So a prime example of populism actually is originally, I think it's Clodius whips up the people of Athens into an absolute furor over what the Mycenaeans have done, and they demand that they send the ships to go crush them.
Yes.
And then as the days wear on, speeches are given, and the people's temper is calmed, and then they suddenly fear for what they've done, so they hastily send a messenger to go tell the Mycenaean, to go tell the fleet that's on the way to Mycenae, you must stop. And I think when they got there, it was too late, and it all been destroyed.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I think that's a prime example, really, of giving in too much to political public opinion. Obviously, public opinion should be valued. Government rules by consent.
Yes.
But it shows you really how easy how malleable public opinion really is. Really is quite malleable. Apparently, even since ancient times, it hasn't really changed much. I would say.
For anyone that's interested, the massacre that we're talking about, a small island refused to pay Athens tributes, and in retaliation, they rather hastily sent a fleet of soldiers to kill every male adult on the island, and they regretted this, but it was too late because the deed had already been done.
Yeah, basically. I think I'll put a link in the show notes to some reading material about it, because it was a really interesting debate, and it shows the fragility, if anything, really, of democracies to an extent. I still think by far that they're the best system, but acknowledging a weakness in the system does not mean that you're. It's the same as criticizing anything, really. Criticism is not the same as disagreement always. Valid criticism, I think, should always be welcome.
If anything, it shows the strength of the system that you are
exactly,
able to.
Exactly. And with the entire politicization and polarization is that people are no longer able to accept criticism. We've somehow become quite fragile.
Yes.
Almost.
Yeah. It's any criticism is seen as a personal attack.
Yes. Criticism is seen as disagreement rather than as what it is genuine criticism. Genuine criticism.
Yes.
You can be a supporter of whatever party you want, but criticizing it does not mean you disagree, obviously.
No, it just means that you feel there's improvement to be made. And actually, it shows the strength of democracy that we are able to criticize it.
I mean, if anything, really, it shows a genuine concern. A genuine concern that you want to see the party improve, or any party improve, really, for that matter.
I think it doesn't help that, as we say, because it's become so partisan. It doesn't help that the lines get thicker and thicker, carved into the wax, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
It gets harder to criticize it because any criticism is just so almost aggressive, it seems. Or people have you believe.
Yeah. I think a really good analogy is partisan politics is imagine they're building a brick wall, and then the brick wall keeps getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, and then at the end of it, no one can hit. No one's actually listening to the other person.
Yes. Yeah.
Really.
That's an excellent analogy.
See, there was a really interesting paper and video I was watching actually about how birth rates are connected to the polarization of politics.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just thought about that. Really interesting. They were saying that people on the extreme left and people on the extreme right are more likely to have children.
Oh.
Always. So and people that are very centrist are actually very unlikely to have children. I think it was by Dr. Edward Dutton, actually.
Right.
Fascinating chap, and he was saying that the polarization currently in society can be explained quite remarkably by birth rates.
Yes, because if there's been more, for lack of a better term, right wing and left wing children produced, it's going to be and obviously people tend to believe that your parents have a large influence on your political views and religious for that matter.
Exactly.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's a very much a nature and nurture of politics almost.
Yes.
But perhaps shows that maybe polarization was always inevitable.
Possibly.
Because
look at, sorry, go on.
I was just saying, really think about it. Parties actually work well. If governments are in opposition, they need to be polarized, I think, to an extent.
Yes.
But I think perhaps the issue is that things got more polarized.
A really good quote on polarization was from Alistair Campbell's The Blair Years, his extracts from his diaries, and he says that they did not believe that governments lost elections, though John Major's flattering and divided post-Thatcherite administration might help in the process. They thought opposition had to win them and worked tirelessly and restlessly in policy and strategic decisions they believed essential if Labour were to get back into government. And I think this really sums up that it's when in opposition, like you were saying just then, the role of the opposition is important in a politicized democracy because it means that they can not attack, but they can challenge the government, which is a key function of democracy, I believe.
Yeah, no, 100%. I absolutely agree. I think that that to an extent, politicization and polarization is necessary, but I think perhaps we've gone past. In psychology, there's the Overton window where things are acceptable, and I think I think we've long gone past what's acceptable.
Yeah, sadly, I think that's very true. And I think it's going to be a hard slog for recourse to get this back to where we think it's acceptable anyway.
But I don't think it's even an issue just with politicians. I think it's a general issue with members of the public as well, because the discourse I've seen is it's no longer debates about minutiae of politics and it's evolved into insults.
Yes.
Like Tory scum, lefty, tosser, all this really visceral stuff that should have no place in civil political discourse, really.
Absolutely, it's gone. I think we might have touched on this earlier. It's you're either with us or against us. And
yeah, exactly.
I see it within, because I've got friends on both sides of the spectrum, and it's just one of those things that now we have to avoid political talk, not for lack of knowledge, or maybe somewhat, but that's part of politics, is learning and through debate.
Yeah.
But it's just such a shame that you can't debate things like this anymore because of it just becomes an insult match, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think obviously that's absolutely ridiculous.
And it doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody because you just become this. It divides people even more. It pushes them to the furthest extremes. Because I've noticed even at university, I've become more right wing.
Yeah, I'd probably say that I've gone more in that direction. From originally I'd say I was pretty much dead center.
Yes, yeah. From year 12, I was on the money. I was dead center.
Yeah, literally year 12, year 13, I was dead center. But see, the other issue is, I think fundamentally, it's an issue to see politics as left wing and right wing, because if you think about it, actually, it's more of a circle.
Yes, are you familiar with the horseshoe model?
Yeah, because if you think about it, fascists and communists have an awful lot in common.
Absolutely.
And extremities, I think, have a lot in common, and really, we should all strive to find a nice middle ground, really.
Yes, yeah.
And also, the other thing I'm really not in favour of, which I think has really aided with the polarisation, is the demonisation of both sides. Both sides are evil.
Yes.
Left wingers are evil. Right wingers are evil.
I think it's worth pointing out that we should say it's the extremities, not
Oh no, yeah, the extremities. I mean, the extremes of both. The extremes of both sides both think that they're, the devil manifest.
Yes. Apparently, it was philosopher Jean-Pierre Fay that coined the horseshoe model.
Oh really? That's very interesting. Yeah. Also, that will also be in the show notes for extra reading.
Yes, it's like you say. I think the thing that we can really take from modern politics is extremities never end well. I mean, because you can have a look at there's definitely a honeymoon period, I'd say. Because look at when Hitler first got elected, there was the honeymoon period.
Yeah, absolutely.
He declared a national holiday. Admittedly, that was only so he could push legislation through without people noticing. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
there's the when Lenin first took power, there was almost a liberation of the Russian people in terms of women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights. It was so almost modernly conscious, and then
I agree absolutely.
Has to. It's the glove and the iron fist. The glove's quickly removed, and it's straight back to the demands that such a society requires.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think that all politicians have a honeymoon period, and they all end the same way. I think Enoch Powell famously said, "All political careers end in failure."
Yes. Yeah.
And I think David Cameron disgraced after the Brexit election. I remember in PMQs he said, "I was once the future."
Yes. Was the most depressing quote ever. I was once the future too.
A very depressing quote, and it shows the absolute, the absolute state of modern politics. I mean, perhaps it's always been this way. I think that would also be a very interesting discussion, as has politics always been this way?
Because I can't remember the quote now, but it's a rather rougher quote. It's same shit, different day. If you'll pardon my French.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel it really. It's a constant. And any progress we make seems to be almost undermined by partisanship. Because there's been some recently, in the past 10 years, there's been some really good measures put forward for LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah.
But they've always been undermined by the sense of, our party wanted to do that first. And
exactly.
While massively true, is still an undermining feature because we should work together in the solace that through admittedly compromise for a lot of people, these brilliant acts have come forward.
I mean, it's almost as though parties think that they have a monopoly on common decency.
Yes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's like with so many other things. It's not necessarily, rightly or wrongly, it's not necessarily who does it first, it's who does it most effectively.
Yeah, I think actually another symptom of our polarisation actually could be the voting system we use.
First past the post. Now that is definitely a debate for another day.
It is. That will definitely be a debate for the day because I've got lots to say about that and why I think that's caused lots of issues that we currently have.
Yes. I mean, just going back a few steps, if you look at the Green Party, they have actually submitted, while a lot of their policies for the general public are too extreme and too environmentally central, they've actually submitted a lot of policies that have been adopted by both Labour and Conservative governments.
I've seen that, yeah.
So there's almost a solemn respect for them because while I don't think they've ever got mainstream electoral success in my opinion, they've put in the groundwork for a lot of good policies.
Yeah, well,
and it's such a shame for them.
Well, I guess I wouldn't say that UKIP's ever made good policy personally, but
no.
you can make the argument that fringe parties actually force the other parties to act.
Yes.
A prime example would be the 2016 Brexit referendum. That was only really offered.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness me, there you go. Exactly. That was really only offered because Cameron was scared of losing voters to UKIP.
Yeah. They effectively, the 2016 election should have been vote Conservative because we're more likely to be successful than UKIP, and we'll do Brexit as well.
I think that's also a debate for another day about the impact that fringe political groups have on actual government politics, really.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Often, as you just said, a good example are Green Party often have impact. So do UKIP.
And then part of that should they have more funding, not necessarily for the impact they have directly, but for the should fringe parties have more funding?
Yeah. I mean, funding is an entirely another debate with
Yeah.
with politics. Actually, do the two big parties have a monopoly on funding? Should the funding be distributed equitably among all the parties, give them a
Yeah.
fair chance?
I mean, I think me and you have both donated via membership to one party,
Yeah,
but I'd say we were still able to form a pretty
exactly.
that that was just in full transparency. But I'd
Oh yeah.
say we're still pretty much able to give a relatively balanced view.
I mean, as we've shown, we both happily criticise the party.
Yes, yeah, we're not scared to pull
Yeah,
punches where they're rightly
definitely
deserved.
not sycophants like some members that I'm aware of.
Ride or die kind of members.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
see, the thing that parties also have is they both think that they have a monopoly on what's right.
Yeah, I think we briefly touched on this, didn't we? And
Yeah.
I think you're right to give it more exposure, because it's not opinion based. It's very much. I think it's the way of modern politics. It's not. I think this, you think this. It's I'm wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, and there is
Yeah, yeah,
there's no
exactly.
compromise. Because if
Exactly.
you look at privatization, for example, especially in the 2019 election, that was a big issue for a fairly left-wing leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, and there was no in between. It was very much conservative, almost back to a Thatcherite kind of era. It was no privatisation versus public monopoly. There was no middle ground of, well, these services could benefit from them and
Exactly.
these services could. It was very much yes or no. And I think, I wish I could remember the name of the man who said it, but I think he was a lord. It was on BBC Radio 4 one morning as I was driving to driving to college, and he said that the thing with Brexit is it's a real multicolored issue, and yet we've just given it a black and white yes or no. And I think this applies to so much.
That may have been Lord Adonis.
Yes, that I think it could have been. That you're very right. Yeah.
I think it may have been, because I think I remember listening to that as well. Very good point. But I think actually that quote perfectly summarises all of politics.
Yes.
Everything is black and white. There is no middle ground. There is no consensus. There is no grey area where parties can come together and work.
Absolutely. And I think actually, because we did say that we felt that there should have been a unity in government for coronavirus, like in an official capacity.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things that stopped it. But it would have been interesting to see how that would have affected it, especially when Boris Johnson was taken quite severely ill.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think whenever a country is faced with an existential crisis, then a unity government should be formed, because this is, briefly touching on voting ever so slightly, first past the post, all you require is a simple majority, 51% to 49%.
Yeah.
To say that almost half the population is wrong is I think absolutely crazy.
Because that's what you're effectively saying, especially if you've got a good whip in Parliament. You are saying that half of the population. I know it wasn't quite. Was it about 60-40 this time?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that ties in really well to what type of model of representation we have. Because you have the trustee model that, for those that don't know, it kind of says that our politicians, so MPs in the UK, can act with autonomy, and they can do what they believe is best. Whereas the delegate model is almost a throwback to ancient Athens with a direct democracy, where the delegate is meant to act in the same way that the constituents would. And I think this was coined by Burke, wasn't it, Alex?
Yeah, it was coined by Edmund Burke, the Irish MP and philosopher, and I think he was one of the key people for libertarianism, really. And Burke actually was opposed to the delegate model, actually, because he wanted the trustee model, because he argued that his behaviour in Parliament should be informed by his knowledge and experience. And I think that's the model that we use. We trust that the MPs will use their knowledge and experience to serve in our interest, really.
Which almost goes against what we were saying about 40% of the UK being dismissed. But it doesn't mean. But because it's first past the post, we are definitely going to have another video on this, because this is quite a
it definitely is
a storm. It's, again, you only need 51% of your constituents to vote for you. So you could argue that 49% of the 50% of the 40% and not being listened to again. It's we're definitely going to have to do this again because there's so much more to say on the issue.
Yeah, I mean, probably the next episode we could do on different voting systems.
Yes, yeah.
We could talk all day about that.
Yeah.
So to quickly go back to coronavirus, I think an issue with the Conservative Party is that they've gotten rid of all these sensible people, really. You know, like I think I was watching an interview with Rory Stewart, who I admire greatly, and
Rory Stewart, what a man!
What a guy! And it was way before the government even acted. It was early March, and when the seriousness of COVID was coming to light, and the sensibleness that he talked with, it's what the Conservative Party is really lacking. You know, now it's been overrun by, for lack of a better word, Boris sycophants.
It was because it used to be, in my opinion, I know obviously we do have a small bias, but it used to be the really, I mean, it's conservatism at its heart is, I think someone described it as, it's not a philosophy as much as it's just a party of pessimism.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's almost the pessimism was the sensibleness of, well, you know, it's looking bad, we should do this in order to protect things. That's why it's the party of not tax cuts, sorry, but of cuts and recession. And I think it was when I had the opportunity to meet Sir Edward Lee, he said that the Conservatives were a necessity because Labour come in with these, you know, fresh ideas, and then it's the Conservatives that have to pay for them because the economy gets dive bombed when they come in with these ideas, and it's the Conservatives that then have to build up the economy, and then people get tired of that, so then vote for the green sky thinking again. But it was
exactly.
It was through. I must admit, I thought that was a very witty thing to say, but it was always through these sometimes boring but sensible approaches, and we just seem to have said goodbye to them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, really, in my opinion, the Conservative Party should be a party of pragmatism.
Oh, absolutely, all day. It is, and you know, because the dogmatic leaders weren't polarizing like Thatcher again, and I feel like we're going to touch on her a lot, but she is an excellent example for modern leadership. She was dogmatic with her approach, and yes, it had some successes, but it was unpopular and still heavily criticised today.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. But really, in my opinion, that the Conservative Party has, you know, all those members that had the whip removed from Rory Stewart, Ken Clarke,
yes,
politicians that really are sensible and really care. Even Lord Heseltine really has been a victim of this. You know,
and possibly Bercow.
Oh yeah, Bercow as well, and also Winston Churchill's grandson. Even he got removed from the Conservative Party.
Oh really?
Yes, yeah. Sir Nicholas Sloane's ridiculous, really, when you have people like that being removed from the party.
Yes.
It shows it shows almost, you know, that Johnson almost wants to be a demagogue almost. You know, it shows complete contempt for you know, institutions.
Yes.
And the way things have been and the way things are, because it's very unconservative, actually, I think.
It is. It's just too dogmatic.
And
it
really is.
It's almost a surprise for someone who idolises Pericles and Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
While Winston Churchill was very dogmatic with his approach to the war, you know, Pericles was a very pragmatic politician, so we're led to believe. And, you know, he said that he not prefers but idolises Pericles over Winston Churchill in many ways. He's got a bust of him on his desk, I'm pretty sure I read.
He does, yeah, and I'm pretty sure he also wears socks with him on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'll have to buy a pair of them myself.
Yeah. Pair of Pericles.
Pericles. It's or a Pericles of socks.
Pericles of socks. A Pericles. Oh no, but I think really that the Conservative Party has really gone the wrong way, and actually the Labour Party, in my opinion, has really gone the right way.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because Starmer's gonna give him a run for his money.
Yeah, really. I mean, Starmer's really taken the party back to a sensible way, sensible, moderate, fairly moderate, you know, very centrist approach.
it's back to Blair. He's a modern Blair, in my opinion.
Exactly.
He's
Exactly.
he's rewriting clause 4, not literally but figuratively. He's really
I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll end this and we'll get the news.
Breaking news: clause 4 rewritten to an even more centrist point.
Based centrist moment.
But no, I must agree.
I mean, it's really sad, really, that that parties have gone, really to the extreme, and now thankfully we're seeing a return to proper centrist ideals.
Which is because what will happen? It'll just take a year. Because David Cameron, in many ways, was, although Theresa May claimed to be a one nation conservative, was very centrist, and I think it was almost in response to Blair's centrism and subsequently Gordon Brown's. But
Exactly.
Mainly Blair's.
But in my opinion, one nation conservatives can be centrist.
Oh, absolutely. There's the possibility of it. But as we're seeing with Boris Johnson, not always the case. And Rees-Mogg, would I be forgiven for? Would I be right in thinking he considers himself a one nationist?
Yes, but I would say that he's very much to the right wing of those issues.
Absolutely,
yeah. But no, actually, a really interesting point actually about one nation conservatism is founded by Benjamin Disraeli, because he saw the UK quite rightly as it is now as almost two countries of the rich and of the poor, and it's very much the idea of paternalistic capitalism, whereas now I think
yes.
Really since Thatcher, we've very much gone down the route of free market capitalism.
It was the slightest whiff of Keynesianism, and all of a sudden the right
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I personally think that free market capitalism, to a large extent, is quite immoral and almost free market capitalism is not one nation conservatism, really. Paternalistic capitalism is truly one nation conservatism.
It gets back to the delegate model almost.
It really does. But it also goes back to a shift in politics in general. All parties now are really free market capitalists.
Yes.
And really, in my opinion, the Conservative Party would be much better off going back to that idea of it's kind of that chivalry idea of paternalism, and I think really it'd be much better off going back to that kind of system. Really,
I think the phrasing of that often irks people, but I think the sentiment's there. So it's maybe not that they are a better of a better class, a better nature, but they are. They should be.
Oh, a better way of phrasing it is it's almost the idea of charity. It's to the more fortunate, whether that be socially, economically, give back. And I think really that's a beautiful idea, and really that's what's missing. Paternalistic capitalism, in my opinion, isn't so much oh, I'm better than you. It's acknowledging that almost. It's saying, yes, I am, but this is what I'm going to do to combat that.
Because if we look at there's parallels to be drawn between the Irish famine, which killed 1 million, was it, or 500,000, and another.
It's quite a few. I mean, the Irish population still hasn't recovered.
And the thing was, they relied too heavily on the charity of individuals and groups, because the government offered next to no help. And similarities can be drawn to the coronavirus, that we've almost relied too much on the goodwill of others rather than the goodwill and nature of the government.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's that very much idea of the market, isn't it? Really.
Yes.
It's that the market will fix things, and what happens if the market doesn't?
Supply and demand. Yeah, it's yeah, because the market doesn't care for everything.
No, it really doesn't.
It's quite a scary thought, to be quite honest.
It really is quite alarming. See, actually, I do think really surprisingly, actually, quite similar things that we can draw from the famine in Ireland and the current situation. I mean, if you think about it, actually, both, rightly or wrongly, have been exacerbated by government inaction. Really.
Yes, because the Irish potato famine largely relied. The deaths were only, I say capped, but capped at 1 million due to the work of many Christian organisations that went out there for charity. The government
Yeah,
almost
exactly.
refused to act because of this charity. They thought it would be the goodwill of others rather than the goodwill and the responsibility, the social responsibility of the government to act.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen the same with the NHS funding. Actually, you know,
Of course.
exactly. Sir Captain Tom now has raised tens of millions of pounds for the NHS, when really the NHS should not have to rely on charity.
Private donations, no, because there's all them gigs for the NHS and things like that. And I know a favoured comedian of mine, Asim Chowdhury, actually sold a lock of his hair that was part of his character on a famous TV show for the NHS. And it's a shame when such a public institute has to be saved by private individuals' goodwill.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and it goes back to the idea of, as we were saying earlier, of paternalism versus free marketism, and the idea that the NHS is somehow going to be solved by the free market or aided, is I mean, obviously, I know the NHS is massively government funded, but by allowing it to rely on donations for key things, that really is not acceptable.
It's not, and it comes back to this one nationism. We had to rely on the goodwill of other countries as well.
Yeah.
America donated several ventilators to us that were critical, but should we have more? This is going to sound almost Brexit means Brexit, but should we have a more localized industry so that we can handle these problems ourselves? Because as we saw when America thought they'd found a cure to a cure, they hoarded all the medical supplies for it. Which
yeah, exactly.
is perfectly reasonable when you realize that it is their own, it is in the interest of their own country, but it does show the fickle nature of the international
exactly
politics.
Exactly. I mean, actually, speaking about international responses to coronavirus, I personally think it's unacceptable that the UK has refused to join the EU vaccine scheme. It should not be politicised. It is a sensible thing to do.
That was, I know that they did it because there'd be criticism of, we've just voted to leave at this cost and etc. etc. There's the obvious reasons why they didn't do it. But
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
They should have just taken the criticism, because
exactly.
If the criticism, it's better than, I'm just looking at statistics now, 46,000 deaths in the UK from coronavirus.
Exactly.
But there's better criticisms to have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the other ridiculous thing is as well is like when the government refused to do you remember how the EU wanted to bulk buy PPE?
Yes.
And the UK refused to do that twice. Like those things should not. Exactly. And then to have a shortage, it's ridiculous. Really, those things should not be politicised. Those things should be for the good of the country. This will be done.
Yes, again, it goes back to wartime, because it is similar in the way that we should have acted. You have to work together, and sometimes you've got to swallow your pride, but you've got to swallow your pride for the right reasons. I'm not saying rejoin the EU and counteract all the work we've done.
Yeah, neither am I. But
it's just there should be certain things that, again, put politics aside for a minute.
Yeah, exactly. No, but the thing is as well, I remember that the government was saying, "Oh, do not worry, we will still work with our EU partners." Well, I haven't seen much cooperation or working with them really.
In fact, it's almost like they've gone, Italy and Spain have acted very quickly and locked down their country. So to show that we're not with the EU anymore, we are going to.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the time, I was sympathetic to why Boris didn't enact lockdown as quickly, because our cases were still fairly low, and it was in a last-ditch attempt to save anything of the economy they could. But we acted too late, and then we didn't act strict enough when lockdown came in.
Exactly. The lockdown should have been properly enforced. It should have been sooner. And really, the easing of lockdown, in my opinion, has been far too quick.
And incorrectly done, as in,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
fine, you can go out frivolously shopping again, but you must wear a mask. You must not, you can go out frivolously shopping, numbers are still pretty high, fine, then you have to wear a mask.
Yeah, yeah. The masks thing should have been in pubs, in restaurants, in shops, in indoor
Yeah.
areas, should have been mandatory to wear before
When-
before the
when
easing of
COVID,
lockdown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just up to people's discretion, because
Exactly.
the joy of democracy is that when we make the wrong mistake, we have to stick with the wrong mistake. Like, personally, I was not for the UK leaving the EU, but as soon as that
same.
vote came in, you have to put your personal opinions aside and go, no, the people
Exactly.
have decided, and this is what
Yeah.
the people have decided. So, and I think it shows the fickle nature of democracy, but also how sometimes, not so much Brexit, but you can see past decisions like the Nazis gaining power. You can see how perhaps the public don't always make the right decisions. So governments in a paternal role should be there to protect the public, sometimes from themselves. It's the same
Yeah,
reason.
absolutely.
It's one of the main goals of justice is to protect people from the people who commit crime. So if you have a mass
100%.
murderer, it's to lock him up is not just for rehabilitation, which again some people question is effective, but it's for the safety of others.
Yeah. We should also do an episode on prisons, because I've got a lot to say about prisons and criminal justice reforms.
Absolutely.
In reality, I mean, again, with the lockdown easing, we again see the populist nature of this government.
Yes.
Opening pubs.
I mean, I was happy when pubs opened purely from oh great, I can have a pint, but I haven't been yet.
Yeah.
So, because while I was happy that they'd reopened for a purely selfish reason,
it should have been in a lot more of a stringent position. It should have been limited amount of people in the pubs.
Absolutely.
It should have been a lot more stringent.
Yeah. What
they should have had?
say?
Yeah, they should have had reduced opening hours.
Because in Newcastle, when I was in Newcastle for a few weeks, you saw people go out, and at the start of the night, yeah, they're fairly self-disciplined, but I challenge most people to have 4 or 5 pints and still be disciplined.
Exactly.
With something that they can't see.
Exactly. I mean, that's really the main issue with it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that the issue with opening pubs is obviously the more drunk people get, the less self-disciplined.
And people can sometimes be not very self-disciplined at the best of times.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot of mistakes that have been made. I think there was some positive action, but I think it's always easiest to criticise.
Exactly. But the issue is that it wasn't as though at the time people weren't saying, right, something needs to be done now.
Yes. It wasn't. It couldn't even be called reactionary because it wasn't.
Delayed reaction.
Yes, there's just no. It almost seems like there wasn't an urgency about it.
Yeah, I mean,
it was very much in the spirit of the war will be over by Christmas. And it just isn't. It never is.
Spent almost 5 months in lockdown and not a lot's really changed. I mean, obviously, death rate's gone down, but we've already seen infection rates climbing, so.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate, because I'm just looking at the 30th of April, there were 4,419 deaths in the UK.
Yeah.
A staggering amount.
I mean, my concern is that infection rates are still really high.
Like why Manchester's got locked down yet again.
Exactly. I mean, it's not in the thousands, but it's close to 31st of July, 850 new cases. Really staggering.
Yesterday alone, there was 880.
Yeah, exactly.
It's...
Yeah, 880 yesterday. In 2 days, you've got almost 2,000 new cases.
And then, I forget what the R rate is now, but it's more than 1.
It has to be close to 1. It has to be. There's no way.
It might even be more than 1. So, it's like watching bacteria grow. It is.
I mean, what should have happened is early March, when we were on about 100 cases.
Yeah.
When it was climbing really high, it should have been right. On the 16th of March, when it was on like 250 cases, and considering 10 days earlier it was 30.
Because lockdown didn't start until
the 25th.
Yes.
I'm correct.
I think you are.
Because I came home on the 22nd and I was like, oh.
Yeah, I was thinking that 23rd of March it was.
Oh, 23rd. Yeah. I came home literally the day before. So could you imagine if I hadn't?
I mean, at first, I'll be honest, I didn't understand the importance of the mask. Like, I mean, really early on. I mean, like January, February time.
Oh yeah, same.
Because I was skeptical. I was like, I didn't realize it was not to protect yourself, but to protect others.
Yeah.
Well, a thin bit of cloth. It's not really going to do anything. It was almost a, very here type of thing.
Yeah.
But then
quite.
Information started to be released, I started wearing a mask really early on, like fairly early on, because, we became aware of the facts, which I think is another important thing about politicization, is...
Facts get distorted.
Yes, but it shouldn't, quite, but it shouldn't be seen as a weakness to change your stance once
Oh no, yeah, exactly.
If anything, it's a weakness just to be arrogant and dogmatic about it.
Yeah, 100%.
Because ignorance is somewhat forgivable, as long as you're not purposely ignorant.
100% agree. But see, the issue always is, I think now we're in a culture of criticism and of critique.
Yes.
Where you've changed your mind, we're going to criticize you, rather than it being, you've learned why you're wrong.
And the irony is, I often find that they criticize when you come to the same idea that they did, but for different reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to the same-sex marriage. There was criticism because, again, it's about who thought of it first. Well, yes, it's important, and you can argue that you are more progressive for having these views first. Surely the point should be that we've had there's been a more general consensus to this epiphany, rather than
fully agree with what you're saying. Really, it's as I said earlier, no one has a monopoly on human decency, and political parties seem to think they do.
It'll never grow old. It'll never grow old, and it will never change, because people think it's important. People think it's more important to be right first.
I'd just like to thank everyone for listening, and we'll get this out quite soon, and we'll hope to do another one. I think the next one will be a good idea, maybe to do one on, as I said earlier, voting and political structure.